Hey, what's going on, people? I'm going to talk about commissions. And specifically, this painting was a commission this last Christmas. It was a Christmas gift from one of my friends to his wife. She is a nurse practitioner, and she loves helping other people and healing them. And she has some Native American heritage in her line, in her genealogy. She wanted to have a painting, or she and her husband were looking at various images of Native Americans. Their focus on healing and helping others, and that's what they wanted to portray in this painting. So I want to talk about the process of getting a commission and working through a commission. I've done lots of commissions, lots and lots of them, and I've learned a great deal of information based off of all the commissions that I've worked on. This one in particular was a nice painting. It was a last-minute decision made for Christmas. I had a couple of days to paint it, and so this whole entire painting was done over a couple of days, one or two layers. It was alla prima type painting, mostly for the most part, and I did work on some other things, but the focus was she wanted to have a Native American woman, spiritual Native American woman, with a albino bison. So in the background, there's a little bison. If you look down towards the bottom, I've worked on this painting horizontally. When I recorded it was horizontal. When I painted it, it was horizontal, because I wanted to see more abstract shapes instead of trying to idealize the proportions and shapes that I was looking at. So I painted it horizontally. But getting back to the commission part, he asked me to work on this painting. I like to cover lots of different options for the client when I'm working on a commission painting. One of those would be giving them multiple avenues or choices with the composition and the style, look, and or feeling of the painting. So I did multiple drawings based off of the ideas and examples that the client gave me. And I worked off of, I think I did 3 or 5 compositional studies to kind of show the ideas that I was going for. And then I created some references, or I looked up some references that were close to the same idea and presented them to the client. And they loved this composition the most. So I went with kind of the praying hands composition, female figure looking down slightly with an albino bison, which I found out means success, that success is around the corner, longevity. There were a lot of different things. I like to do research on different concepts or ideas that the client has so that I know I am creating an art piece that I can put all of my thought and idea into and make a good composition for the client. Not only a good composition, but a good painting. So worked those studies out with them, and all the wife had no idea that we were working on this painting together. So came up with this idea concept, and he said, yeah, go ahead with it. Why don't you do that painting? So I painted it about 18 by 24 inches, and I like to start off with a palette knife to block in the shapes, the colors, and the textures, because I want to get a general feel and idea and align my hue, value, and chroma relationships within the composition so that it looks correctly. Now, before I started to work in the paint, I created this whole image digitally. So I used that as my reference off to the side. And you can't see it in the image, but I used it off to the side as my guiding reference generally for the hue, value, and chroma. I didn't stick with it 100%, but again, I feel like a reference is a reference. It's not the end result. And I try to get it about 90% of what the reference actually is. I will make some changes on the fly, but they're minor changes. So when the client gets the painting, they know what they're going to get 90% of the time. There's a little bit of leeway there, some artistic leeway to be able to describe what's going on. And I usually talk to the client about that. So before I start working on my commissions, I always get half of the money down. I shouldn't say always. Most of the time, I will get half of the money down so that I can start working by getting the supplies needed to be able to work. And it shows that there's a level of commitment from the commissioner. Ooh, that sounds interesting. The commissioner. So the commissioner will give me that money and I will start working on it. I do not start working on it until I get the money, just because I want to know their level of commitment. So I got the money relatively quickly and started to work on this painting. Now you can see that I had it all drawn in at the beginning. That's because I already knew what the composition was going to be. I had it drawn up. I had the digital reference off to the left, and I knew exactly where I wanted the shapes and the proportions. So that's what I started to work on, were those shapes and proportions. I just did a line drawing I didn't draw it in, I painted it in with simple lines and then started to work out the details, applying some paint. Now, I usually don't paint very thin. I like applying a lot of paint, but when I'm working in canvas or on canvas, I like to slowly build up the paint and fill in some of the shapes. I like the abstract shape that is created from the linen in relation to the paint quality. So I will try to plaster on more and more paint the further in I go in the painting so that I get more of that texture, and then the thin paint kind of shows through on the canvas, shows through on it. So I like that look and that feel of the canvas. Most of the paintings I've done lately have been actually on panel, but in terms of commissions, I always ask them what materials they want, and I write down the expectations. So I say, you will get this painting by this date if money was received by this time. I also make sure I let them know that it is unframed, or if I am framing it, that it will be delivered to them, framed or unframed. But that is a part of the contract, so that there's no real question what the expectation is to receiving this painting. I also give a little description in the invoice or the receipt, whichever way you want to look at it, and present that to the client so that we're both on the same page. And if they do cancel, I keep the 50% down that they put down, and they don't have to pay me the rest because I've committed my time and energy to start the process and create the design, doing all the work before even starting to paint it. So if I paint it and they decide to not want to buy it, I keep that 50% and they go find a different artist to do the artwork. Now, the nice thing is I've never experienced that. So I always have it there as an out in case a client does want to or doesn't like the painting. But I don't think I've ever had somebody say they don't like the painting. They wouldn't commission me to do a painting if they didn't like what I created. At least that's what I would think. So I talk to them also in terms of the style. I like to paint in multiple different styles. Some is more impressionistic, some is more photorealism. I give different prices based off of the complexity of the image. This one was relatively complex. A half figure with a bison, albino bison in the background. I had to do some research on that. And then also the red rocks in the background. But for the most part, because this is a friend of mine and he asked on such short notice, I gave him a deal for the painting. I thought it was a deal. It was a steal of a deal. And they went along with it. So when I'm working on these paintings, I also like to have, when I'm working on linen, more of a mongoose type brush because it holds enough paint to be able to get some texture on there, but not so much that it scratches out the paint quality. And as you saw earlier, I was working on that bison for the detail. I'm working from the background towards the foreground so that I can really get the edge quality that I want in the flesh tone. That's the most important part for me, is trying to get the flesh tones correct and the values and the colors in the flesh tone. You'll see in the painting, it looks relatively red in the shadow shapes, but it gets lighter in value once the light shapes are developed, and it's just the white of the canvas right now. A lot of times I will tone the canvas before I start painting, but I've painted a lot over the past couple of years, and starting with a white surface has not really stopped me, mostly because of my process. Most of my process is blocking in those simple shapes and values. And you'll see here when I put in this gray fabric that is just underneath the shoulder there, down the bottom left-hand corner of the painting. When I started to work on that, it was a little too dark, might have been a little too light, but it's hard to tell when you're painting on white canvas. So I think it looked just a little bit too dark, and I will do a second layer over the top of that later to really turn the form because it just looked too dark. But I'm comparing the relationship of those values and colors of the fabric to the background and how light or how dark the fabric is in relation to the background. And it also allows me, when I paint from back to front, to have harder edges where I want them, or softer edges. I can just soften them out into the background a little bit more. But you do have to be more careful when rendering in the form, because if you accidentally do a brushstroke that goes too far to the right and you paint it in the background, now you have to repaint that background area, which is really not that big of a deal. I go into this almost always thinking that I'm going to have to do a second layer or a third layer on it anyways. And I like that approach because then I'm pleasantly surprised when I only get it done in one layer. And if I have to do a second layer, it's not like I have these high expectations that I have to meet for my painting to render it. Now, another question that people ask me all the time is, how do you know when your painting is done? Which is a great question. I tend to just go with the flow. If there's paint over the entire canvas and there's nothing jumping out at me screaming and saying, oh my gosh, this needs to be repainted, then I won't repaint it. I'll just let it be. And it can bug some people. My wife, she loves more rendered work that is just polished and pristine. And I tend to like things a little bit more raw. Not so raw that it's distracting, but raw enough that there's a play. You can see brushstrokes and you can see different paint textures and colors and values. I like the broken color look. Some people don't like it. But for this commission, that's exactly what I was talking about with them, is that this would be more of an impressionistic style painting. As you can see in the background, it's not fully rendered. It's stylized. It's simple. Yeah, it's like a poster study with some form of steroid that is sitting in the back. And I just like the simplicity of the background versus the complexity of what's going to be happening with the figure here in the front. Now, as I move into the painting with thicker paint, because this is the white of the fabric in the light shapes, I will shift over to a bristle brush because I'm able to apply more paint on it. This is a flat, no, this one I think is a filbert. So a filbert brush, and has a bristle brush, which is made of hog hair. This one's a natural one. I don't really like the synthetic ones. They tend to fray a bit too much for me, but I really like the paint application of the natural hog brush to be able to turn form. So here I pick up a lot of the paint and I will drag it across to enhance some of the texture in the canvas. And after I have the light shapes and the shadow shapes blocked in, then I will go back in and start to refine the reflected light and the cool cast shadows. So here's an interesting topic in terms of painting. You want to hear some of this stuff about painting? Well, listen up. When you are painting, or when I am painting, a cast shadow I found that if the ambient light in the space is blue, like the blue of the sky, then I will paint the cast shadow that is angling upward bluish. And you'll see that in some of the creases in the fabric, how it tends to go blue, where the plane would be parallel with the ambient sky. Then I will come back in and refine those changes in the painting. The other parts that I'm looking at is the warmth of the bounce light. So all of the shapes that are angled downward towards the grass, the sunlight is bouncing in onto the white of the fabric, and it's bouncing up into the fold that is facing down towards the ground. And because of that, I will warm up those values and colors by using more of an orange or a yellow. So that way I have blue for the cast shadows, and for the reflected light, I'll have yellow, because that is the light that is coming into the form. And then when it's closer to the flesh tone, I'll have some of those reds and oranges bounce back into the fabric to be able to make it look more realistic. If I could speak, for Pete's sake. So hopefully you saw off to the bottom or the right of the figure that the shadows, I repainted those and lightened them up a little bit more so the values were more compressed and it looked more accurate in relationship to the skin tone and the background. It's just a little bit lighter in value because that ambient light is hitting it. Now going into the hands. Hands always freak people out. Man alive. They're one of the funnest things. I love painting them because it is an intense puzzle. John Singer Sargent would say that he was the worst at painting hands. But man, that dude knew how to paint hands like it was the back of his hand. Okay, that's not a very good statement, but he was really good at painting hands because he knew how to simplify them. And I only wish that I would be able to render hands as well as he did. And if you simplify the forms, the plane changes, the big shapes, then it will make a difference, and it is easier to be able to see how to turn form better. Thing that a lot of people forget, though, is that they will make the terminator value on those hands or on the flesh tone to be really warm. And I really like making the terminators cool right before it goes into the core, which is the darkest part of the shadows on the form of an object. That terminator, when the light terminates into the shadow, to me, when I look at it, it looks nice and cool. So I will try to render out those cool values just to increase the contrast between and create variety of color in the flesh tone. And then where finger meets finger, or hand meets hand, or ear meets face, or nose meets face, all those fun little areas is where the chroma really increases, and chroma meaning the saturation, and it is a nice orange or red. And I have this color, it's called perylene red. It's a beautiful color. And I will use that all the time to be able to get those nice moments of red going in there. So what is happening is the light is hitting a semi-transparent form, flesh, which tends to be semi-transparent, and the light bounces between the two semi-transparent objects, which creates this warmth, this glowing feeling between it. If you've ever taken a flashlight and put your hand over the flashlight, you'll see where the bone is in your hand. The flashlight won't show through, but it'll go around and it will expose through the layers of skin and muscles and tendons and ligaments, and you'll be able to see this beautiful red color because of that intensity. So I try to get that by introducing some cool terminators, warm cores, and then beautiful bounced light, almost occlusion shadow colors in between fingers and all that stuff. Just really warms things up. All right, now I'm moving on to the flesh tone of the lights. And when I first started this, I was like, I don't know if I really like this color. But I started to continue to go with it and use the relationship between the white of the fabric or the off-white of the fabric and flesh tone. It was just a little bit more orange, in some areas a little bit more yellow. And then it does the same thing with the fabric as it does in flesh tone, where that plane that is going up to the sky is going to be cooler, and the direct light is going to be lighter in value, not necessarily cooler. So I know this video is not about critiquing how to paint or apply paint, but I just think that these are good topics to discuss in terms of convincingly turning form. So back to commissions. After you have received your money, half of your money, and you've worked on the piece, they've already signed the contract, you've started working on your piece, I usually don't show the client the painting until it's done. I found in my experience that if you allow them to have a say during the process, which is something that I used to do all the time. As an illustrator, I would do illustrations and show the client, and they would give me direction on where they wanted me to go with the paintings. And I found out pretty quickly that if you just do the painting your way, I mean, that's why they're hiring you. They're hiring you because they want you to do a painting your way. If they're hiring you to do a painting in somebody else's style, just have them ask the other person to do the commission for them. I have some really good friends that when they work on commissions, they say, I'm not going to do anything you say. I'm the professional artist. I get to pose the models or the family or whoever it is. I get to dress them. I get to put them in the scene. I'm going to figure out what the composition is, the colors, the values, everything. I get to decide it all. You just get to pay me for a finished painting. And a lot of people just agree to that. Some people really want to get their hands in on the game and joystick your artwork. I don't know how else to phrase it. So they basically, I was thinking of joystick coaching. You know, I'm a soccer coach, and joystick coaching is like, hey, move here, do this, kick that, do that. So some clients will want to do that. They'll say, okay, I want to have a say in everything that you do. And I'd recommend staying away from those people. It's not worth the stress or the strain to work with that type of a person. I would tell them, you know, if you want this very specific thing from a very specific artist, you should ask that artist, or you should just do it yourself, or you can let me do it and then you can pay me for the work that I've done with it. I'm the professional artist, so I should be the one that makes the decisions. Now, I don't do what some of my friends do. I tend to give the client some more options because I want them to be happy, but also select what direction they want to go. So they feel like they have a little bit more of a buy-in. It is a commission. So commissioning them, or them commissioning me to do this very specific painting, the flip side too is, if I do this painting for them, am I going to be able to turn around and sell it for money if they don't like the painting? And again, luckily for me, I have not had that experience. Hopefully I don't, knock on wood. But I try to let the client know that when I'm working on the painting, I will present them with a finished painting. And when it is finished, I accept full payment within 12 days of accepting the painting. That also is stated in the contract. So make sure that you have a contract that is written for people to sign, and that you make sure that they understand what they will be doing, or the process of the commission, when they'll receive the painting, how much time you'll spend on it, when payments are required, if there are multiple payments, and when the final payment is to be given. So you can see here now, I have worked on the face. I didn't really like the values or the colors. They just weren't dark enough. It was almost too light, and it was starting to get chalky in the lights. So I went back in and started to paint the jaw and the cheek. I wanted to turn the form of that cheek, expand it a little bit more. It looked too flat compared to the other side. So I wanted to expand that. And this was the next day when I came in and started to work on those facial features again, which here I'm using a fan brush to try to get more interesting texture in the lips and in the cheeks and in the nose. And where's the reflected light and the bounce light? And anyways, all the fun things to think about when you're working on a painting. I know I tend to have a lot of squirrel moments where I get distracted by things. I really should write an outline for all of this stuff so that I can stay focused in a linear manner and express. But I kind of like the fluid nature of me discussing and talking about these things. It makes you, or it should make the listener or viewer want to watch it until the very end, because what other good sporadic squirrel news am I going to give you in relation to commissions? At least from my experience. That's another thing. A lot of people have different experiences. Some people have very bad experiences and they never do a commission again. Some people have excellent experiences and that's all they do is commissions. I don't love doing commissions all the time. I enjoy doing one maybe twice a year because I want to work on my own stuff. I'm kind of selfish with my time, you know. I'm a professor and I teach art and I'm helping people all the time with their own art. And I want to spend time on my own art and refine things. And if I'm just doing commissions all the time, then I'm doing it for a client. I'm doing it for somebody else, and I'm not working for myself and trying to increase my skills or understanding of projects that I'm wanting to work on. Commissions are nice because it is just guaranteed money. You know, you're getting the money from a client to be able to pay for your art supplies. You don't have to worry about sending it off to a gallery and hoping that it'll sell, or posting it to Instagram or YouTube, hoping that it'll sell. The commission is done. It's out of my hands. And I'm moving on. I tend to have about 50% sales on a lot of my artwork, meaning whatever I create, I will sell half of it. A lot of my paintings that I sell are undraped or nudes, and I will sell those nation and worldwide. And I love painting nudes because it's the human body. The human body is amazing. It's crazy amazing. I mean, just think about it. In order to walk, I mean, what the heck? You don't think about walking, but all of the muscles in your legs need to fire, and that needs to be stimulated by the brain to be able to move your legs. So we can be unconscious of our walking and walk normally. I mean, that is just amazing. Isn't that amazing? I think it's amazing. So anyways, the body, it is freaking amazing. So I love painting the human body, and doing a commission with a figure in it, I really enjoy it because I like the play of color and the play of value and how the semi-transparent skin tone will reflect its environment. Like, for example, here in the head of the Native American woman on her right jaw, it's a little bit more blue. That's because the light is bouncing up into or off of that feather into her jawline. So it's cooling it down. It should go a little bit lighter in value, but you know, hey, I'm okay with where it's been placed. The other nice thing is with the direct light that is going on the face, you can see that I put a really warm color along the forehead before painting in the hair. And that allows me to soften out that ridge line that is on the head. And it makes it look like it's a subtle cast shadow because it's more of a transparent oxide red that is thrown in there. And now is when I start to have a lot of fun because it looks like a head or a face, but as soon as you start putting hair and eyebrows and eyelashes, don't paint individual eyelashes, please. Just don't do it. Sargent didn't do it, so you shouldn't do it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, unless you're a photorealist, then paint all the eyelashes that you want. And all the strands of hair, go for it, dude. Or dudette, whoever's painting it. But anyways, here I'm using a really big brush to be able to express these shapes in the hair. And I think this is the third day of going on it, and so it's all relatively dry. as I'm painting in the hair, and it's this nice jet black hair with these braids going down the front. Braids, right? Yeah. And then just softening out the edges of the hair that's going in the background and making it a little bit cooler on top of the head because of the ambient light that's bouncing into it. Anyways, so lots of different things that I'm thinking about and working on here, but I am trying to make the texture interesting. I'm trying to make the colors interesting, not too diverse that it looks like some bubblegum painting, but just enough that it looks interesting, especially for the client. Trying to soften and refine edges. That's another thing that a lot of students will get wrong is they paint hair like it's a freaking helmet and it's so hard edged and they paint all of the shapes so hard edged, and that's just not how it looks. If you squint down and look at shapes, man, everything is so soft. It really is soft. And if you paint everything hard edged, you have to render out form. I'm not so much of a renderer. I mean, some students might call me lazy. That's fine. You can call me lazy. I'm lazy with my paintbrush because I want to imply certain shapes or forms with one single brush stroke. I want to do what Sargent did. Dude, that guy was a freaking master of disaster. Look at each individual brush stroke. Like, how did he do that? Well, he just did it with one brush stroke. That's how he did it. It was amazing. So how can I simplify it in the same way? Well, I'm trying to do that, not as successful as Sargent, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there, people, getting there close. Lifelong learning process here. And I think that if I stopped teaching, I would really, really learn that process quickly because I would have all the time in the world to be able to work on these paintings and make it look Sargent-esque. But I want to paint how I like to paint, not exactly like other artists. So I'm going to just continue to do that, even though I would love to paint like Sargent. So when you finish your commission and you call the client, kind of like here, I'm starting to finish it up. You talk to them about delivery and payment. Nice thing about this one is they paid me before I delivered the piece. I gave it to him. It was Christmas Eve, which was awesome, and he had it available for his wife. It was a total surprise for her, and she loved it. So she sent me a nice text and said, "Thank you so much." And it was another nice experience with doing a commission. They said that they'll commission me to do another painting, which would be great, maybe for their office space or something. And that's fine, whatever they want. But hopefully you have learned some good things by listening to this video about commissions. I just want to share my experience and knowledge. And if you don't like it, then that sounds like a personal problem. And you don't have to listen to me because this video is on YouTube. Isn't that great? It's so good. All right. I hope you enjoy the painting. Sorry I don't have an awesome reference of the finished image, but this is as close as it's going to get. I'll have to ask him for the picture, and maybe I'll submit it and update the image a little bit later. Thank you for your time, and have an excellent day, and good luck with your commissions.